Hey everybody, this is Christian, and today I'd like to present you my new storage server. Really, I'm so excited to finally share it with you because I've tried out a couple of new things for this project that I believe are super interesting to know for HomeLab nerds like us. First, I've built a brand new server with a cool rack server case that comes up with 8 hard drive bays, and it has a different mainboard and CPU configuration, which is now very power efficient, so it doesn't explode my energy bill again like my old storage server did. But it is also very fast because of its 10 gigabit network card and 2 SSD caching drives. And instead of true NAS, the operating system I usually picked for all my other NAS installations, this time I tried out something new and I went with Unraid for the very first time, which is a really nice operating system with some very unique capabilities for building disk arrays. So let me go through all of this together with you. I'll explain in detail which specific hardware parts I've used for this project, as well as my first impressions of the Unraid operating system. Hopefully you'll enjoy it, and it might also be helpful if you want to build such a cool storage server yourself. Because yeah, in a HomeLab we love to tinker and build servers by ourselves. However, if you prefer professional server equipment in your HomeLab or maybe in the company you're working for, I've got something special for you from today's sponsor, ServerMall. ServerMall offers a wide range of refurbished server hardware from leading brands such as Dell, HPE and Lenovo. It's a company with more than 10 years of experience in advanced IT solutions for businesses, and they provide both standard and customized builds tailored to meet the needs of any business, from small companies to large corporations. What I really like about ServerMall is that they offer you a 5-year warranty on all servers, storage and other equipment, which is 2 years longer than most manufacturers, which ensures the resiliency of your IT infrastructure. And furthermore, they approach each client individually and offer you first-class service at all stages of cooperation. And thanks to their own assembly center and warehouse, ServerMall guarantees a fast and reliable door-to-door delivery anywhere in the EU. So why compromise on quality when you can upgrade your IT infrastructure with top-tier server hardware for less? ServerMall is a smart choice for both HomeLab tech nerds and professional companies, so check it out. Of course, you will find more details at the link in the description box down below. Alright everybody, so let me give you a quick overview of the different hardware parts and components that I've used for this new storage server build, and also explain why I have made these decisions. And first of all, I want to talk about the motherboard, the ASRock N100M, which is an M80X motherboard that comes with an onboard Intel quad-core CPU, the N100, that has up to 3.4 GHz and is passive cooled. This motherboard only supports one DDR4 memory module up to 32 GB of maximum capacity, and it also only works with non-ECC unbuffered memory modules, but it has a full-size PCIe 3.0 slot and another smaller X1 slot, which is great for adding any expansion cards to this, and it has an M2 socket for NVMe drives that you probably use for boot partitions or additional caching drives, and it has 2 additional SATA ports if you want to add SSDs or hard drives to this. It also only has a 1 gigabit LAN port, so as you can already guess, this is kind of a smaller sized motherboard that I probably would not use for running many virtual machines or using a lot of computing power or where you need a lot of RAM. But I think this is a great balance of performance and power efficiency. The N100 chip from Intel has recently gained a lot of popularity and love from HomeLab people because for its power efficiency, but it is still pretty fast enough to run smaller sized home server builds. So I think this is just the perfect choice for a NAS operating system. For the memory module, I've not used anything special. I've just chosen the cheapest DDR4 memory module I could find on Amazon. So this, which is the Lexa DDR4 memory module with 16 GB. So honestly, I've never seen any major differences in memory modules when it comes to different brands or speeds. It might be different for gaming, of course, but I think for a small and efficient NAS server, 16 GB with that speed is totally fine. You could even run some applications on this, maybe 1 or 2 VMs in combination with the N100 chip. I think that should definitely work. Because the ASRock motherboard only has 1 gigabit LAN port, I also added this expansion card from 10G Tech. This adds a 10 gigabit SFP plus port to this storage server build. And I've always made great experience with those cards, especially with the Intel X520 chip. This comes in 2 different versions, the DA1 chip that has 1 SFP plus port, but it also has a DA2 version that comes with 2 10 gigabit SFP plus ports. And those are really great because in those SFP plus ports you can put anything that you need. You can put a copper or a fiber optical JPEG in it, or even attach a DAC cable. And this makes sure if you're using this as a NAS device that you're transferring the data over the network with full speeds that your hard drive supports. And now let's also talk about the rack server case from Silverstone, the RM21308. Now, if you're searching for this case, you probably find it a bit expensive and overkill for my HomeLab usage. And yeah, I agree, the rack server cases from Silverstone are definitely not the cheapest ones. But what I can say about them is that they are really great in quality. My experience with the last rack server case from Silverstone was really outstanding. And so it was this time, yeah. I never had any problems with sharp edges where you could get a cut on your fingers. And what I believe makes this case very special is it is a 2-unit rack server case, so it is pretty tight, but it can hold up to M80X motherboards, which is perfect for the ASRock N100M. And it has an 8-port hard drive backplane, so where you can swap drives in and out pretty easily. Those hard drive cages, by the way, have a pretty cool adapter to easily use it for both magnetic hard drives and SSDs as well. You can also add 2 internal SSDs to this case, so that fits perfectly with the 2 SATA ports on the ASRock motherboard. And also nice, you can put a full ATX desktop power supply into this 2-unit rack server case, and it even has some fan slots on the top so that you have a proper airflow with any regular consumer ATX power supplies. Now, I know some people said in the comments of my last videos where I used a 2-unit rack server case also from Silverstone that if you add another device on top of it, the fan slots don't really make much sense because the air slots are always covered by the device on top of it. And that's why I got this new ATX power supply from Seasonic. So this you can get in different configurations with 600 watts, 500, 400 or 350 watts. And those power supplies are really great. They have many ports to connect and power many SATA drives. And what is really special about this power supply is that it doesn't take the air from the top like most of the other consumer ATX power supplies. It takes the air from the front. So it is a perfect airflow for a 2-unit rack server case, which makes it my preferred choice for any projects like this. Alright, now let's talk about storage, because I found this amazing rack server case from Silverstone with an 8-port backplane. Of course, I needed some way to connect up to 8 hard drives to my ASRock motherboard. And this became quite of a challenge because I already used the X16 slot for my 10 gigabit SFP Plus card, and I only had this X1 PCIe slot left on the motherboard. Now first I used this card here, which is an 8-port SATA PCI Express 3.0 card that comes with 2 SFF 8087 ports, so those fit in right perfectly to the backplane of the Silverstone case, and you can put it in the open-ended X1 slot of the ASRock motherboard. However, I was a bit worried about the performance with the X1 slot because I wasn't really sure if this gives you enough performance, so I used a different way and I found this interesting card, which is also an 8-port SATA card for PCI Express 3.0, but with an M2 slot. So you can easily put this one in the M2 slot on the ASRock motherboard, which means you cannot put an NVMe drive into it for the boot partition. However, I will explain this in a few minutes how I've solved this problem. But this is really nice because this should give you much more performance to power up to 8 hard drives, no matter if you're using SSDs or magnetic hard drives. And this is really nice if you have smaller motherboards where you need the PCI Express slot for 10 gigabit network cards, but you still want to be able to connect many hard drives for any storage server builds like this. As for the hard drives, I just used what I had in stock, so to speak, yeah, because I had lying around some 4 terabyte Western Digital Write Plus drives from older storage server builds. I only used 4 drives now because maybe I want to be able to expand the array in the storage server dynamically in the future. We'll, by the way, also talk about how that works in the software. And I also added 2 SSDs to this Silverstone case, the MX500 from Crucial with 1 TB, so those should be enough for any caching drives that I might need to add in the storage array later. So once I got all of the parts ready, I started building this server. Of course, this wasn't the first computer that I've built, so I probably don't need to go in all of the details here. Actually, there isn't much difference between building desktop computers and home servers. If you've got some experience with computers, you probably know how to build such a server as well. I can just say that the idea with the ATX power supply that has the air slots at the front, that was really great, because you can see in a 2-unit rack server case there's not much space left for any airflow, and also for all of the other parts the space is quite limited. The ATX motherboard just fits right in perfectly, but a larger one would definitely not work in this case. Also for all of the cables there's not much space, and that you have to keep in mind because you're gonna need to connect a lot of different things like the backplane with some power and data cables, the 2 SSD drives, the I/O ports of the case. As you can see, it is all very tight in here, and honestly, it doesn't look that great. But anyway, who cares? I'm usually not gonna take a look inside my servers all the time, right? However, I still believe that using 2-unit rack server cases is much better than any of the other 3 or 4-unit rack server cases that I've used in the past. Because as you can see, it gets quite busy in my server rack here with all of the switches, the Proxmox nodes, and my new Kubernetes cluster. So this storage server fits right into that space here. And overall, I'm very happy with how it looks inside my server rack now. But yeah, these are all of the parts that I have used for my new storage server build and how I've mounted it into my server rack. By the way, if you want to have a full list of all these parts, as always, you will find them on my kit page. A link to this is in the description box down below. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room here. Let's talk about the new operating system that I've used for this project, Unraid. Many people have asked me in some of my older TrueNAS videos whether I had tried out Unraid before and what I was thinking about it. So I thought, well, let's give it a try this time and see how good it actually is. And honestly, I'm really impressed by the Unraid operating system. This is really an easy to use system for any self-hosted servers or NAS builds. At its core, it provides great features for adding redundant storage pools. For example, you can easily add multiple drives to this system, add a parity drives to protect you from drive failures. But it also has some interesting capabilities that you might be looking for in HomeLab. For example, you can easily run Docker applications, so you can manage and run containers with the Unraid's simple web UI. You can manage virtual machines with it. You have a community app store to expand the capabilities and a VPN manager. So in my opinion, this is really a complete operating system for any HomeLab usage. It might not seem to have all the advanced features from other NAS systems, but if you're just looking for a solid and reliable operating system for home labs that also has some very unique capabilities, especially when it comes to power efficiency in storage arrays, Unraid is a pretty interesting choice. One thing you have to keep in mind though is that Unraid is not free and it is not open source. You have to buy one of those free licenses here depending on how many drives you want to attach to the system. So if you get the starter license, for example, that costs $50, you can attach up to 6 storage drives and get free operating system updates for 1 year. If you want to attach unlimited drives, you can use the Unleashed license or the lifetime license if you also want to get free operating system updates for life. They, by the way, also have a 30 days trial period, so you can easily just use this trial period to find out whether the system works for you and if you like it. And what is really special is this license is tied to a USB drive from which Unraid also boots the operating system. So it is recommended to use a high quality USB drive with at least 2 GB of storage from a named brand. Not all USB drives will work, especially the cheap ones that don't have a unique identifier, they won't work. By the way, if you want to have some recommendations on buying those drives, I've chosen this USB drive here, the Samsung Fit Plus USB 3.1 drive. I think I got the one with 128 GB because the 32 and 64 GB were out of stock. So it actually doesn't make a huge difference in price, but you definitely need this USB drive, and it should be a fast and high quality drive that you might also have to back up from time to time. At first, this choice seemed to be a bit weird, so to boot the entire operating system from a USB drive into the RAM. But honestly, for this particular storage server build, this was just amazing, because I needed to use the M2 slot on the motherboard for the 8-port adapter to connect the 8 hard drives. So I didn't have any additional port left for an operating system drive, and therefore Unraid is just perfect for this server build, because you don't need a separate drive for the operating system. Once you got yourself a USB drive that works with Unraid, you just need to download the Unraid USB Creator tool. You, by the way, get this for Windows, Mac or Linux, so whatever operating system you're using on your workstation. And then just open it, choose your preferred Unraid version you want to install, and just follow the instructions. By the way, the version that I've used for this project is the version 6.12, which was, at the time of recording this video, the recommended version by Unraid. I know that Unraid already worked on a newer version, but which was in beta, so I wanted to stay safe and use the recommended version for this project. I also have to tell you that I first got a few problems with this tool and the stick, because it didn't seem to detect my USB flash drive at first. It always said that it was on block list, which usually only happens on cheap USB drives that are not supported by Unraid. However, the problem turned out to be something entirely different, because I didn't notice that I connected the USB drive to a USB hub that I was using on my Mac. So if you have that kind of problem with a USB drive that you know for sure it should work with Unraid, but it just doesn't work, check if you have some other USB drives or hubs in between. Because once I connected the USB drive on the USB ports on my Mac directly, it was immediately recognized and I could flash it with the Unraid operating system. In this tool, you can also configure the network settings and set the host name at this step to provision this system before booting, so that you don't have to attach a monitor and a keyboard and set it up first. And yeah, then you just need to plug in the USB drive to your server and boot your server from that stick. I, by the way, just configured a couple of other settings in the BIOS first. So usually the ASRock motherboard all have a pretty good default configuration, so I just needed to change some little things like the boot order to make sure that the USB drive is always the first in the row, and some other power settings that ensure the system is running at a lower performance level and is optimized for power efficiency, which was one of the goals of this server build. And once Unraid was booted, I could easily connect to the IP address of the Unraid server, and then I needed to register the USB drive with my license key I got from Unraid. That all was, by the way, pretty straightforward, so you basically just need to follow the instructions described in the documentations of Unraid. If you have any problems, I bet you can also reach out to the support team if you have problems. But it's actually pretty simple. You just need to enter your activation key, which attaches your license to that specific USB drive, and then you're ready to go. And let me just walk you around a bit of the Unraid web UI and show you what I've configured on my new storage server, so you get a better feeling of how this system works and what you can actually do with it. Now, let's first of all start with the dashboard, and here you get a good overview of your overall server's health and what is the system status, the resource utilization, and so on. So on the top left corner, you get information about the system, like I've called my server NAS Production 2, as you might know it from any of my other servers, and there you can also see the model. You can stop and restart the server here or turn it off. And what is really nice, you can also give this server an icon or an image, so you can select it from those different modules. You can also upload a custom image, so if you've got multiple Unraid servers, you can easily differentiate them from each other by just looking at this icon in the dashboard. And I just chosen this one here, the 2-unit disk case, which probably is most accurate to what I'm using in my storage server build. You also get information about the motherboard, the ASRock N100M, the BIOS update. You see the CPU and memory utilization here, the network interface, inbound and outbound bandwidth, and you get some information about the running Docker containers, the network shares, users, the array, parity section, and those type of things. So it's really nice. By the way, what is a bit weird on this system is how you can enable the dark mode. So this was the first thing that I've tried to find in the options. So you need to go into settings and then into to display settings, and then you can enable the dynamics color theme that you need to set to black. And then you can also choose to change the header custom text color to white, so that you get white text color on a black background on top here, so to make it in full dark mode. Honestly, when you go through some of the settings in the web UI and go around some of those sections here, you can see this UI feels sometimes a bit outdated. Yeah, it also doesn't have a responsive design for any mobile phones, by the way. I think this deserves an update at some point, but it still does what it needs to do. So for example, if you need to manage any system on Unraid, you can easily do that from this UI. And let me also go through some of the special things in this Unraid array. Now, I've connected all those 4 terabyte hard drives from Western Digital and put them into one storage pool that might look similar to a RAID Z1 in ZFS, but the Unraid array is something entirely different. Unraid uses a different file system, the XFS file system, and it uses a customized version of MDADM, which they just call the Unraid array. And this has some pretty cool advantages, like you can add more disks at any time in the future, even with different sizes. So you can see, if you want to expand your Unraid array, I could easily add another drive with 8 terabyte or with 2 terabytes if I want, without having to destroy the existing pool and recreate it like you would have to do in ZFS. You just need to make sure that the parity drive on top here, this is one of the largest drives in the array. So if I would want to add an 8 terabyte hard drive, I would need to add a second parity drive with 8 terabyte, and then I could add as many disks as I want. Now, what is also cool is you can spin down those disks here when they are not in use. For example, if the data is existing on disk 1 and somebody needs to access the network share and read the data from the disk, only the disk 1 needs to be turned on and the other disks can be left spun down. So you also see this with this icon here. The device is in standby mode, and if I want to spin up the device, I can easily just click on this and now it starts up the disk, which might take some time until you can access the data, but it is much better for power efficiency because all those drives consume power, of course, when they are in use. So this is a pretty cool feature that is, compared to something like ZFS, where the drives are always in use, much more power efficient. And what I can also tell is this Unraid array doesn't need such high CPU and memory usage to keep the data in the cache, for example. But it also has a couple of downsides. For example, the XFS file system and the Unraid array doesn't have any snapshot function, so you cannot just take a snapshot and go back in time. And it doesn't have a native cache function. So that's why if you want to have a fast storage pool, you have to add a separate cache pool instead. So that I've also done. You can see it down here, the pool devices. So here I've added one cache pool. This is using the BTRFS file system. And this is pretty important because the cache pool isn't automatically written back to the Unraid array. If you put some data on the cache pool, it stays on that cache pool, and every night, I don't know, maybe at midnight or something, a scheduler copies back all the changes from the cache pool to the Unraid array. But it also means if you got a drive failure in your cache pool and the data is not written back to the Unraid array, you might lose some data. So therefore, I've used the BTRFS file system to mirror those 2 SSD drives and still have some kind of fast storage pool, and then at midnight those data is written back to the Unraid array. But it also means whenever I'm using the cache drives, those Unraid array disks can be spun down entirely, which is also very power efficient. By the way, just to mention, Unraid also has ZFS file system pools, but it doesn't feel as mature as it is on TrueNAS, and I didn't want to do any experiments on my production server with that. So maybe I just set up a second Unraid server and play around with the ZFS functions. I also believe like the ZFS functions are still somewhat work in progress, so it still doesn't have equal features like TrueNAS has, as maybe they will improve it with an upcoming Unraid version they're currently working on. But at this time, I believe the ZFS file system is still in somewhat like a work in progress state. For the network settings, I configured the second network card, so the 10 gigabit Ethernet card that I added as the ETH1 NIC production. So here I just disabled the bonding, because you can also enable bonding to combine multiple physical interfaces to have some sort of redundancy or to increase the throughput of the system. But I don't always like this management, so I like to connect it to separate VLANs on my switch. So that's why I have the internal network port configured as the management network and the 10 gigabit card as the primary network interface that I would access from any servers or workstations to get access to the network shares. What is also nice is you can add plugins to this. For example, I tried to install a custom plugin, custom tab, where you can just add custom tabs in the UI. So it's really customizable with any of those community plugins. And here you can find not just plugins, but also Docker containers you can install. So again, it feels a bit like all over the place here. For example, if you go to the custom tabs, you can see this is from the application type plugin, and this you can easily access. And here in the settings menu, you can add another tab, for example, one here with just some testing stuff. So apply this, and then you have custom menu point here that takes you to what you have configured. If you want to deploy any Docker containers, for example, let's go to the Docker tab, you can simply add a container in here, select a template that you've already created, or you can go into the app section and search for any container, for example, Nginx, which is a simple web server. So click on this. Here it also tells you this is the application type Docker, then you can install it, and then you can just deploy this. What is also nice, you can easily configure a network type and select a network interface, give it a separate IP address, so this probably uses Mac VLANs under the hood, but you don't have to deal with all of the complicated Docker network management. It does all of that for you. And of course, you can also add any virtual machines. I haven't tried that on my storage server because, as I said in the beginning, this wasn't the primary goal of this server build. But yeah, the next days I will probably experiment a bit more with it, try to add a couple of virtual machines or Docker containers to just see how that works on Unraid. As for the disk arrays and the initial testing that I've done, is I've made the best experience with the Unraid array, because that seemed to be the most power efficient and the most reliable and simple option for my storage server. But I will also spend some time experimenting a bit with the ZFS implementation, maybe with BTRFS pools and so on. I will let you know once I figured out how that all works on the system. Alright guys, so that's it about my new storage server. I've already started to copy and migrate a couple of things over from my virtual TrueNAS storage server to this new Unraid storage server, so I'm definitely going to use it in my HomeLab, because so far everything has been working great, but of course I'll keep you updated about this progress. By the way, I'm also currently working on 2 more videos about Unraid. I will do one in-depth tutorial video where I'll explain how to set up an array, how to add a caching pool, maybe talk about the different file systems, ZFS, XFS, and so on. And I'm also working on a second video where I will compare Unraid to TrueNAS and give you my final verdict on which one is now the best NAS OS for us HomeLab people. If you want to follow this, make sure to check out my Patreon page, christianlemper.de, join as a member for free and keep up to date with all of the videos and tutorials. And if you're already there, it would be so kind of you if you consider supporting me, so you'll also get some cool benefits back in return. So that's it for today. Many thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Take care. Bye bye.